don't want to give away too much before we even start presenting.
You want other stuff to be.
I know, so I'm really bummed about that. It looks stupid. The map's cut off. You can't even.
What do you mean it's cut off?
At that aspect ratio, like our whole website's like cut off. It's at this one. Yeah, the website's like cut off. It was
Try to just it stretches, right? It's responsive.
No,
So try to make the window size smaller.
no, but even
Like
if
a
it's
different-
smaller, it cuts off the map.
Are you doing mirroring or no? Turn on mirroring.
No.
So, well, that will make your presentation a lot easier because you won't have to look back. Display, control preferences, display,
Show mirroring options.
Yeah, should be it. And then I think there's something to.
Oh, no, that's right.
Yeah,
There should be something that says.
What about arrangement?
Yeah, that's probably it.
Mirror display.
Yeah, there you go. That'll make it a lot easier.
Ah, okay.
What's going on with that.
So do mirror display, Martha, when you present. Mirror display.
Okay. So
Yeah, because we were
now-
doing an extension, but it's better to just do mirror display.
Okay, so now bring up your map, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started. So where's the map? You said wasn't working.
Yeah,
Let's take a look at that. Let's see.
But it's not, yeah, it's not gonna.
Pretty good. Make the window shorter. Shorter, and then reload it. Will that change anything?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it is what it is. It looks pretty
Yeah,
good. It's
I think-
understandable.
What am I looking
We-
this is the only thing that we have to work on, like in terms of
Let
technology.
me see. That'll be fine. Doesn't even look bad. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a quick spiel, and then we'll get started and call you guys up here. Okay, just give me like a second. Hello, everyone. Good morning. We're finally going to get started. Sorry about all the delays. People apparently had trouble getting here because of traffic, hires, and stuff like that. Glad that didn't happen to any of us. We all managed to get here on time, and we're ready to go. So we're going to start out with Matthew and Lauren, Nelson, and Martha. Martha? Oh, Ellie. Sorry.
No, she was just a.
Yeah, she was just helping. Yeah. Okay. Matthew, Lauren, Elliot.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna put a full screen.
Okay. Yeah, that looks better. Hey, guys, good morning. So we are Team 1, or Team Bracket 0, as we like to call ourselves. And we're here to present our project called Safe King, which is an educational but lighthearted approach to sexual health. So basically, the premise of our website is to be a one-stop shop for people trying to understand what sexual risk exists in their states. And the reason that we came up with this idea, I actually have a personal story where one time I was commuting home from work and I got off the train station and all of a sudden I'm blasted with a huge marketing campaign about how Florida is the #1 state in terms of HIV infections. And I was shocked because I actually didn't know that HIV was that prevalent in our states, especially considering that our high schools aren't that bad and you'd expect sexual education to be pretty good, and that people would practice safe sex, but unfortunately that's just not the case. So instead of having a scary approach with what the media does, where they scare you like, oh my God, this many people are dying from XYZ disease, we wanted to have a more comical approach where we understand everyone has sex, but not everyone dies, and if you understand the risk that exists in your states, then you could practice safe sex. So here I included a clip from the popular movie Mean Girls, where it's an example of terrible sexual education in high school where don't have sex because you will get pregnant and die. That's not the case if you educate yourself beforehand and you actually make an effort to practice safe sex. So if you could just open up that app. So I'm actually going to hand over the floor to Lauren to discuss more of the front-end development and the UI of the website.
Hi guys, so basically we wanted to have like a one that initially it was going to be pretty simple. It was going to be pretty direct. We just wanted to have a map that showed kind of a little bit of statistics of the STD rates. Or what we found ended up being total cases per year from the CDC. So we just wanted to keep it like a one-page layout, make it really simple. We actually added this funny little section of random jokes because again, we're trying to keep it very lighthearted, a different approach to safe sex. The map is using D3 and SVG Pass to populate and show the different fill, having it darker based on the different STD total cases per year. And then you just click it, and it shows you in a nice little modal in a table of total cases.
So Laura, would you like to explain for the people who don't know, explain what is SVG and PATH?
SVG is just like a vector file, and it basically gives you like path coordinates that you are able to bring into your web page for a variety of different shapes. And D3 is just a library that helps you facilitate that easily.
So with D3, similar to how you kind of map out a state on a map where you have the longitude and latitude, what D3 does is that it actually builds the map using more than just the longitude or latitude. It like has every single point of a state in order to have a really responsive or somewhat responsive map on a site.
Exactly. And we ended up using a template that included SAS and Gulp, so we were able to download those dependencies and incorporate them into our app so we could put it onto Heroku and everything. And then here, these little cards, these are dynamically displaying data from our database as well. So if in the future, like we hope we're able to add on a wider range of STDs, we can just add those on instead of having to hard code them into the system.
And then handing it over to Elliot and Nelson to talk about the database.
So on the back end, right there. So when we're talking about that, I guess is like a primitive content management system that could develop in the future. We used the MVC architecture model for this project. We didn't use SQLize because Nelson and I, we wanted to gain a better understanding of ORMs, even though they are custom. It's just being able to call them using callback functions. I also used routing and
the database that we're using is containing 3 tables. One table for the STIs, one table for the states, one table which is used to create a many-to-many relationship between the first 2 tables, and that table contains the amount of cases in each state, and also the STI ID and the state ID. So we use that table to combine both of the other tables and then show the information that is displayed in the model. Also the information that, can you go back to the STI description? Yes. That information regarding the STIs is pulling dynamically from the database. So this, we pass this information through handlebars to the page dynamically when the page loads. So that's how the database works.
And we're also, inside of routing, we're using promises in addition. So we're using callback functions and promises. So we can understand how to do that stuff.
Because we had the issue that at the beginning, when the page loads, we wanted to display the information from the STI descriptions and also the information regarding to the states, the name of the states, all that thing that the map is using. And then we went through an issue with that. If we load both things, one is gonna load faster than the other one. So we had to use that promises, and Jonathan Morales, thank you for that. He gave us a clear understanding of that thing.
And finally, deployment to Heroku, and then using JAWSDB for the database. And that's it for backend, I think.
So overall, at first the project went pretty smoothly. We did run into some issues. For instance, when we first started this project, I had wanted to use a JavaScript library called Pop Stop Motion, which has more animation to it. So we wanted to use their modal, which is a little better than Bootstraps, but unfortunately, it just wasn't working with our files. So we ended up using the Bootstrap modal. Another issue that we ran into that we were able to solve, thank goodness. At first, when we were working on the map, we were using dummy data. So the dummy data was populating while the heat mapping was working. But once we actually started getting the information from the database, that's when no colors were showing. The modal wasn't popping up with any information. So we spent hours working on getting that fixed. Overall, we're really happy about our project. Obviously, we want to educate people, but also not scare them about the dangers of sex. So where we want to take this even further in the next phases of our project is that we want to add a form to the page where people can submit free local HIV STD testing centers. Because right now, when you look up STD testing centers, they're all for profit. So you have to pay a few $100 just to know whether you have an STI or not. Thankfully, in Miami, we do have some free testing centers, but I can't speak for people in Idaho or any of the Dakotas. Another addition that we want to add to the site, right now we're showcasing total cases per state. So as you can see, if you close out the modal, obviously the states with the highest population, such as Texas, California, and Florida, will have the highest number of cases. But we want to have the ability to switch to another map where it shows the rates of infection, which unfortunately is still pretty high in the South. The South for HIV infection dominates with 45% of the entire nation in terms of HIV infection. And Florida, as you know, is #1 when it comes to any kind of infection. So
in addition, we also wanted to add like custom animations and illustrations, possibly like CSS animations, or if not 3JS. But the time was a little bit short this week. But definitely making it like more custom to just be like more playful, more fun, more like on brand for like this particular app.
So, any questions?
How much sleep did you get?
I think we slept pretty well. We worked pretty diligently in the beginning of the project. So
I think also our group worked really well together. We just kind of, it just flowed. So we didn't really have any hang-ups with like any, arguments or disagreements or anything like that.
One thing that worked really well for our group is not only using the GitHub projects, but also just like making sure that whenever we were working on a file, we were working on a different branch, and we weren't working on the same file at the same time. So once the changes were able to be deployed to the master, Elliot and myself were the people handling the changes to the master branch. So anytime that they would deploy changes, we would double check to make sure that there weren't any conflicts. And if they were conflicts, we would just resolve them at that moment and then merge it into the master. So it went pretty smoothly.
Yeah, that was actually awesome. I would say that was like, apart from our personalities working well together and just our like motivation to work on this project, the version control with the branch merging was really awesome.
I have a question for the backend folks. I know you guys spend a long time on getting the two SQL queries to run concurrently using promises and everything, but I don't see how that's even being used on the front end. And I know the front end folks had to go and make 50 different AJAX requests so that they could get all of the data they needed. And I don't see this data that you guys were working on.
They're not using 50 different AJAX.
Yeah, there are.
Pull up the repo. That's how I can see.
There are, for every state, they have to loop over all the states and go back and get the data individually for each state in order to populate the heat map. So they're making 50 different AJAX requests. What they needed from you was one JSON file that had the data for every state organized by state. And you could have gotten that by doing an inner join on the states table with the STIs table. And then you would have been able to organize the data by state with one request. So one of the things that I think made that hard for you guys is that you didn't use an ORM. You tried to write your ORM. Had you used Sequelize or something like that, it would have been really easy to get the inner join and then give them all the data they need in one JSON instead of having to go back and times. So I think that was kind of just like a failure for you guys to communicate and really understand.
I wouldn't mind to review that after class with you because I don't think that's what that's what occurred.
Yeah,
I think
it is.
So what they use the promises for was not for the map, however.
Oh, what? So what are we? Where is that?
That was for this.
The promises was for this and also for getting the
So it was-
states for you're populating a drop down, which
was for mobile,
which is when
is
you
not
resize,
working yet.
it shows.
Okay.
instead
Yeah, if
of-
you look at our
But
repo,
still-
you'll see that we're not calling the Ajax 50 times. We're
No,
using
it
a
is.
for each loop using handlebars. Want to go over that to class? We can go.
No, I helped them get the math working.
So then
Talking
talk
about the
about
math.
Great job. You guys did a great job. Great job.
I think he's getting the math confused. I think you guys are talking about one thing and he's talking about another thing. You guys are talking about the
Yeah.
drop down, he's talking about the math.
I have no idea about it.
What they work on is
I don't know
for-
what he's
Yeah, so what I'm saying is like try to communicate better with the backend next time because they are making it, what?
I don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so that's
I
the
mean,
failure
we
to
didn't
communicate
see it as
with
a
you.
problem until you mentioned it,
Team.
because it was working.
Yeah, you should have had one, but that's,
Oh, that's.
yeah, I mean, I get it, but it's at the same time.
I miss you
I
guys.
personally am not there with the.
Got it. I mean, you guys still did a good job. I'm not saying that. You guys That's not as much, but it would, I mean, that would have only added like another 2 seconds if they had done everything.
Just call it back.
Yeah, go to the disco
Okay, are you guys ready for what's next, everyone? Drum roll, please, drum roll, please. With everyone to pay attention. We have group 1, Michael, Jackie P, Madison Morris.
They're lost. They're under the.
Good luck, guys.
I know, but somebody's gonna take initiative. We just went up there and.
No.
So I'm gonna write it.
I'm back.
And then you can
I was thinking it would be an opportunity to have to get here, but I think.
No, but at least you guys had your accidents. That's it.
Yeah, I've been driving out here.
Oh my God.
I'll be right back.
Hey.
Yeah.
Where's the last? So, and then we They look nice. So let's start. Okay, thank you.
Well, it's yours as a map.
So I will do
You guys,
No, they have a Thunderbolt. They don't have that.
Yeah, use the Thunderbolt.
how do I?
Well, no, just, yeah, this is what I said. Where's the, this is the USB, right?
I think more diving, right? More diving.
Okay, everyone.
Yeah, so this is the red light right there. Where's the? So what did you guys put the HDMI from the
break,
thing?
whenever you guys feel is
That's the
good.
HDMI?
We can do it. How long is it gonna take this group to get set up? You guys want some extra time? So why don't you guys take this time now?
There's some food next door. Food, chips, sandwiches.
We're gonna wait a few minutes. You guys can go get food and come back.
That's so sweet, because we're called Lawrence, and she also has a new computer.
It's not gonna work. I tried everything. Just my Mac is really weird about it.
Yeah, no, but she had the air display on. Well, you guys, if you're not gonna show like you can use that computer.
That's true. I can just open it from the.
Just open it on that computer, and that way there's no screen for you guys. Unless, were you gonna show your SQL database or anything? Oh, okay.
I have to. He has to stay logged in.
Oh no, Google doesn't matter. But like, I was talking about like going to your GitHub repo, opening up the Heroku app.
Oh, but everything is on our presentation, and our Heroku app's linked through our presentation.
Oh, it is. Oh, sorry, no wonder. I was like, where is this connected? Yeah, this isn't gonna work. You have. I didn't realize that new Macs all had different ones. I thought they all had the same lightning one.
You would think so.
Yeah.
I would think that you just.
I am not a Mac
Was
developer.
that?
Not a Mac developer.
I think it's
Oh, it was Robert. Yes, that's right. Robert. I'll just leave it up here then. Might just use it. And then Maddie, I'm just gonna close your computer.
What is that?
So make sure that you switch it to laptop. So this is yours? Oh, nice. Okay, there.
Daddy, did you send me your or you'll just log in?
Well, the other class needs to eat too.
What?
The other class needs to eat for both of us.
Oh, it's for both of us. Okay, no wonder. I was like, what?
So what are you guys trying to do? Good?
I think come for the water and everything that.
I'm just looking for. Where are they?
Give it like 3 minutes.
So what I said was.
It was an idea that people.
I figured that Sam's routine was the most complicated one. So we asked ourselves.
Are you running a Windows VM instead of Linux?
He's not very impressed.
You sound very. You've never done that before?
I've never seen that before. No, I've never seen someone do Windows instead of Linux. It's usually
Oh,
the other way
Windows
around.
inside of Linux.
Yeah, it's usually Linux instead of Windows.
Yeah, well, you can do it. You can actually get free VMs from Microsoft for testing.
Really?
Yeah, for any IE, any version of Windows.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so if you could just developer.microsoft.edu.
Yeah, I'll keep my workbench up. Oh, you're funny. I got my workbench up on this one.
Okay, well, which one are you guys using?
You better working on this? No workbench is running here.
Agapina, calling Lana.
Noticing.
Hi.
Hey, everyone, take your seats. I think we've got enough
Like
people
every
for-
project, Jackie has alcohol.
So not only is the application that is used for the specific use of mining,
What is your team? What team are you saying?
Team Lucas and Friends.
Team Lucas and Friends. Yeah.
Coinlata is a web application for specific use of small mining facilities. To keep track of mining rigs, mining pools, cryptocurrencies, wallets, total coins produced per mining rig, and investors. It also keeps track of the current price in US dollars and fluctuates with the Bitcoin fluctuation.
Okay, so to use Coinlata, you have to sign up with the Civic for passwordless login. We're gonna demo that in a minute. This helps prevent scalable attacks such as data breaching. You will need to fill out all the requirements items you would like to check off. This might include your rings, investor wallets, and mining. So building Coinlata, we had a mock-up, and then we had an idea of what we were gonna do. And then little by little, we started, me and Madison, we started designing the page. And Mike, with Mike's idea, which are bring Mike's to make it look.
All right, everybody, so the technologies that we use was the Civic app, which Lucas and Madison are going to introduce shortly. We also use Node as our backend server, Express as our routing engine, Handlebar for HTML templating, MySQL to hold the data, and I have that here on my workbench. SQLize as our ORM, Socket.io to do our calls for the rigs to the investor to the mining pool, and Travis CI to do our testing. Shall we look at our app?
Yeah.
You guys wanna see it?
Let's do it.
Ooh, you got it, .io.
Okay, so when you get to our webpage, the first thing you need to do is here, if you don't have the Civic app, you just download it, it takes a minute on your phone. And what you do is, once you get in the Civic app, you log in, you put your information, and then you just slide, and it gives you an option to take a picture of a code. So if you see here, you have the code, you go to your computer, take a picture of the code, and then takes a second. This is safer than using passwords and everything on our page, on anybody's page, and then it opens up.
So we've got 4 tabs. We've got our rigs, which is, sorry, I need to look at my notes. A rigs is it's a computer terminology that creates cryptocurrencies. It's used by the mining community. That's what a rigs table is. Our investors table is where an investor can go and create their profile, put their company name, first name, last name, username. And then we have down below, the table will refresh with the investor's information. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it refreshes itself every 5 minutes, so that's really great. Then we've got our wallets page where you input your coin information and then the wallet address, and then it auto populates for your table. So there's different types of coins and cryptocurrencies, and I just want to jump off and just say a big thank you to Mike, because he's our silent killer, aka our maestro. He wanted, originally we were gonna do a little like gift wrap or gift and excuse me, I don't mean to give you my back, please excuse me. We were gonna do a little like page that reminds you if it's Mother's Day, it prompts you to. But Mike really pushed us and said, let's do data mining. And at first we were really intimidated, but I think fear is always a good thing to challenge you and help you grow. And personally, I learned a lot with Mike's guidance. So thank you very much, Maestro. There's cryptocurrencies, there's different types of coins that you put into your wallet and then it auto-populates that information. And then the last part is the mining pools. And please forgive me because this is a little bit too technical. I'm not very good with cryptocurrencies. However, this is where you put in the information on the mining pools. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, Mike? Or?
Yeah, you just each mining your rig mines to a mining pool. So then there's the data of how many coins your rig is making at the mining pool. Here you would put in your API information so that you could pull that total coin data into the system.
Okay. And then you can log out. Eventually, long term, we hope that this is something that an investor will see that is into the cryptocurrencies. My understanding is that this is where the future of money and everything is going. So we can develop it and it can be sold as a platform for an individual cryptocurrency investor to track his or her information.
Awesome.
So
like, what was the biggest challenge that you faced with this project?
Like, how we dealt with the biggest problem? Well, the APIs, we worked on it for like 5 hours on Monday. That was.
And then I had to transform the data because we're using data tables. So I had to, it wanted it in a specific format, but I had the data from the API in a different format, transforming it.
Can you explain again how and where you used Socket.io?
The Socket.io, when we retrieved.
When you click in the add button, it's sending sending the request through there with the data that you put in.
So you're not like refreshing the page and not getting any Ajax stuff. It's just through Socket.
The only thing that's in the Ajax is the data tables.
Okay.
Sending the data with the button is all going through Socket.
Okay.
What is the concept like of the name? I don't know if I missed it because I missed like a couple.
It's a coin. The original name is
Colada.
but it takes coin and then we changed it
Just
to
going off of that
Colada.
whole chai.
Yeah, coffee, mocha, yeah.
Cool.
I like it.
We signed it up. Excuse me? What did you say?
Lucas.
Oh, what's up?
The logo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of authentication program do you guys use for users to log in?
Civic app?
Oh, Civic. Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Log in
that's what the
Civic.
Civic app.
There's no password. There's just the app.
And it does the generation with the QR code and the scanning of and everything for you?
The Civic app has a site where it gives you vanilla JavaScript and you just upload that and you start to use that with the app.
Well, how do you sign up like a new user? Civic. Yeah. Oh, you have to have an account with Civic in order to log in.
You download the app.
You just download the app and you put in.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
But how do you
Yeah.
register with your coin lotto? Like, I want to join. How would
You
I
go to their website, you go to their developer section, and then there you can log in as a developer and
So you
set up.
would
Oh, no.
your Civic account,
Mhm.
and then you log in with Civic, and then once you log in with Civic, you can add data to your.
You click on login
So off of the
and then you
profile,
take a picture with
No,
your
I
phone.
know. I meant like if I come across ropes, I'm like, oh, cool, I want to join. Like how to register with your site.
Well, you have the-
Civic.
You have to go to.
As
Civic.
as long as you have a Civic, you can log in.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
okay,
right,
cool. Got it, got it,
yeah,
got it.
there you go. Yeah, can you do it one more time? Yeah.
Sure. You go to the store, you get the Civic app.
You can probably do it there.
Yeah.
Take a picture of the screen.
But does no one here use two-step
Uh,
authorization?
Two-step authentication.
Yeah,
It gets.
I use that for like almost everything.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about myself.
The first time he's gonna ask you, oh, are you sure you wanna log into this page? Okay.
Okay, now will you explain the new user experience, how a new user would get into this website? Adding their information to that too.
Yeah, can we see the login? How did you guys do the login?
On the app.
Just
Oh, it's through Civic.
through the app.
So you already have to have a Civic account in order to log into this? What is it?
Yes,
That's how
but
you
you get,
register.
when you,
Okay, and Civic is what? Is a Bitcoin platform?
yeah, it stores the hash inside,
Oh, so it's a
the
wallet.
Bitcoin blockchain. And then you have a key, I have a key here in my app that has a private key to decode that
So it's
information.
a wallet.
It stores it in the Bitcoin blockchain, the authentication.
Oh, it stores your information.
That's good, guys.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Jonathan, first, we gotta get feedback on, are you guys done?
And we had the Travis CI, so that it would do a test build, and then from there, it would deploy it. It deploys it to.
Oh, okay, so you use the integration there. Okay, thanks, guys.
You guys are done? The sandwiches? Go back.
Are you giving feedback, Jonathan, or no? Are you going
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna do.
I was involved.
Now we're going to the other-
No, I was here. I was here taking notes.
Oh, you're good. Okay, so I'll do Safe Kink. Sorry, guys, that you only got negative feedback for Safe Kink. But I wanted to say your presentation was really good. The idea is really good because there's nothing like that that really gives us information. I thought it was a good use of public information and kind of bringing public donation information to the public, which was really good. As I say, the only thing was your database architecture could have been better. I felt like the back end, I thought it could have used a real ORM instead of just using SQL. And I know if you come from a SQL background, it's like, do I really have to learn all this annoying ORM stuff when I already know how to just write the SQL? Like, yeah, I get it, but then when you get into things that require inner joins and the more complicated stuff, then it starts to pay off.
We're just kind of afraid of SQL.
Yeah, no, I get it, and that's why we make the requirements. So, and also, yeah, the communication, I felt like could have been like a little bit better, like understanding exactly what it is you need and then asking for it and working together to get it. And that's something that happens like only all the time when you're working in software development. There'll be a need that isn't communicated quite right, and then another team goes and does it wrong, and everybody's putting in a lot of work and getting things done, but it's all based on like false assumptions. So that way it doesn't ever really get to the right goal. So it's good to learn to be like really, really exact about what it is that you need and how we're gonna get there and all that kind of stuff. But this is a really good, good start. You guys got it all done within like 2 weeks, which is good because it's a lot better to get it done than to get it done well, or to get it like halfway done. So, but any other feedback, guys, on safety? What did you guys think about it?
Awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. Yeah.
I still think our communication, I'm gonna
I
have a
think
rebuttal.
there's a misunderstanding of
Yeah.
like how you think we interacted with it versus
Yeah.
like.
Well, just that you could have had, so the backend, you could have been one request to get you all the data from the map. That could have been in one request. So you guys could have worked together to say, hey, here's what T3 needs in terms of our data, and then you could have made the backend push the data.
Right,
into
so
that.
that's where the rift is that we did communicate well with our needs, but what you're saying is optimized needs, which we didn't know we needed to be at that level because of our understanding
Yeah,
of
like
three.
when you were
Okay.
saying to do three, I wasn't at that, like, I
Yeah.
fully understand that, so I communicated what I need. That was
Okay.
not how you saw was the best way to use T3, but for us
Right.
using it first time,
And this is just like, yeah, and this is just to be clear, like, this is really not to make you guys bad and wrong. Like, I thought you did a great job. This is like feedback coming from having worked like professionally and seeing what it takes to make things not only work, but work like performantly. It's like, oh, here's something that I would have changed that I would have like done differently, just to like share that experience so that you guys can benefit from it, not to feel bad.
We still wanna go over with you, just.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like,
I'd be
see
happy
where
to-
we can optimize.
To our understanding, your understanding is at a higher level than ours.
Yeah, also, yeah, and my feedback was more for the backend developers, because it was sort of like up to them to understand. As backend developers, it's up to you guys to sort of understand what the front end needs and give it to them. So if you have a really inefficient thing like that, where you're making 50 AJAX requests, you should understand it.
We gave it to them. They didn't use it, that's their choice.
Okay, okay, and guys, this is not about making, this is like, part of this is being able to accept feedback and stuff that's industry best practice without like getting.
We are accepting the
Okay.
feedback, but we wanna work with you one-on-one to understand.
Okay,
it.
so well, yeah, so I will get with you guys one-on-one on this. I don't want this to turn into a huge quagmire, and you guys did a good job. So, next, Coinlata. Whatever you think of Coinlata.
Damn.
I think it's
Talk
interesting.
about
Very interesting.
industry disruptor.
Yeah, I thought so, because I have needed, that was one of the things that I felt was missing for me when I got into trading crypto, is just having a really good wallet that gives me all the information in one place instead of having to go back and forth from sites like Coinbase to all the different sites to Binance. It's really nice to have it all in one place, so I thought that was good. It's good how it uses blockchain technology for the login. All of that stuff seems really good. I think there's a few things that can be like, I mean, obviously it's hard. That's a professional product, and you guys got a really long way towards making a really very advanced professional product in just 2 weeks. So I thought that was impressive. You know, obviously it would take sort of time of actually using it to figure out like what features are really working for you, what features you like, what you want to remove, all that stuff. But I thought it was really good. Jonathan, any comments on the technical aspects of that?
I'm not too familiar with like cryptocurrency stuff, but it shows that you guys put a lot of work, like in the back end. And I'm assuming that's why the front end is a little bit lacking, kind of simple, because you guys were working with a lot of data, so that's good. Presentation wise, I noticed that I think you especially were reading a lot off of the slides, just kind of reading word for word. It's nicer when you guys just kind of play with what is already there, more just telling us, and then we can read, you know, the presentation. I think that gives a little bit more of the professionalism. Where you're talking about, yeah, that's tough. It's tough. It's a complicated thing.
Yeah, I had to look at my notes for a couple minutes because I was worried to say the wrong thing because the very specific terminology.
And I know you guys did really, really well without knowing anything.
Yeah. I didn't want to confuse a wallet with a rig, so
Yeah.
probably asked him 10 times what the rig was. So,
Yeah, no, you did a good job. You did a good job. Any other feedback for them?
I would invest.
Yeah.
If I had money.
Okay. Jonathan, can you see who's next? Do you have that slide?
All my devices are dead.
All right.
My phone's broken, my laptop's dead.
What kind of started you? Nobody has one.
Surface, no? No, not this. Oh, this one is the actual screen. The LCD broken.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
using my watch.
Wow, this is really turned into like in Murphy's Law.
Yeah, I know. It literally.
Okay, group
It's fun.
3. Jose, Gretel, Chris Gonzalez, Robert.
I like it.
All right. I really do. Do you grab one of those?
No, I'm hungry.
Does anyone have a paper and pen?
What?
Pencil, pen, paper.
I have a,
I got
a
pen,
pen.
yes.
Paper.
I know, but it's the only thing I didn't bring my notebook.
So you want me to grab?
The chair's closed.
Oh, okay. Okay, what's your team's name?
We are Team 13.
Team
There's a
13.
concept behind that though. One lady, 3 guys.
Wow.
Not 13.
Oh, that's nice.
Could have been 31, but
Yeah.
13 something. Yeah, 13 something. So good morning. My name is Robert. I'm right over here. Jose, Team 13. We came up with this concept here, an idea of a need. The healthcare industry in Senegal is huge, and there's a big opening for us to actually do something innovative with TikTok. TikTok, a lot of times, you're in a cruise, you come back, and you may have gotten a cold, or you go on a trip, and one of your kids is sick, and you need to see a doctor immediately. Rather going to urgent care, rather than going to the actual emergency room, you just go to TikTok. Choose the specialty that you want to go to. Pulls up the list of doctors in your area. This is going to be based off right now in Miami, Florida. So it pulls up the doctor based off specialty, and it shows you the insurances that they take, so you'll be able to choose who you want to go to specifically. Once you choose them, it pulls up the doctor's calendar for that week. So a lot of us at times, we call doctor's offices, or we put you on hold, then you see what we got. Here you'll be able to see exactly what they got immediately. You see that time available slot, you click on it, and your appointment is ready. You end up going to the doctor without having to leave the house or calling and just take your information. The site also gives you the opportunity to fill out information as well, so that you can have that you pre-fill it out before you get there, so once you get it, the office will put that information as well. So it ends up being very efficient. It ends up being hassle-free, which is a lot of people want to go through. And with that being said, I'll pass it to Roberto to talk about the content.
The page for just for front end demo?
No.
Okay. Okay.
For the front part, Chris and I, we just use typical bootstrap, mesh, and some kind of elements, but also we use a webflow to create all this stuff, all the components. There's no more logic behind that, just the AWS code. We're doing active research, and I just wanted to say thank you to Adrian. He really helped me a lot with all the design, trying to implement. Hey, yeah, the design.
No, we can go through different pages if you want.
No, it's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
But it's not showing the background image. I don't know why. Maybe because
The screen's really light. The screen's really light. It's right here.
it's the brightness.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's it. There's no more.
Oh, there it is. Oh, that's cool. What a background image.
Yeah.
Looks like it.
Yeah, the screen's really light. No, that's not gonna fire on. All right, so I worked on the database, the back end, and the routes. Right, so this is the URL diagram that was produced from MySQL. These are all the tables we've had. And the idea was much grander when we first started to have a client side and a doctor side. That way, like Rob was saying, the client can fill out a form of their medical history and stuff like that, which is all good. That's exactly what the client would fill out. And then depending on the appointment that was made, the doctor would be able to see it. But we didn't get to the doctor's end, so this is going to be proof of concept on the client side. So these tables do exist, but really what you guys are going to see, this one, clients, appointments, schedules, and doctors are the ones that are really kind of talking to each other. And that's what's going to be produced. So I'm just going to run through the demo real quick. All right, so this is the, I guess the splash screen, and we have a drop down here that has all the doctor's specialties, and these are all produced dynamically from every specialty that's in my database. The database was populated from an API that Rob found, so all the doctors that show up, with the exception of a few test doctors, they're real. So, if, yeah, they're not fake. So, if you hit internal medicine, you search, those are 2 real doctors. Yeah, and then the one that is working correctly, general practice. And then from here, the idea is to select the doctor you want to make an appointment with, either because you know them, or address-wise, or they take Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you hit select,
And then we were gonna make a table Monday through Friday, but this is the fastest, easiest, and cleanest way to implement it. So every drop down here, as you can see, it has different times, and that's because this specific doctor's schedule is also held in the database, and these drop downs are populated by their available times. So the idea is, let's say I want to go at 10 in the morning on Friday. I hit this, it says I have an appointment, and I sign back into that same doctor. That 10 a.m. should not be there because whoever else signed in before has it. So, and that's the idea. And that's it from. I don't know if you want to talk about the expansion.
So the expansion, the more that we want to add to it is on the actual business side as well. So that's why it was a big, it was very tremendous to work with. The business side aspect is that the actual offices will get this information in real time. And like Jose mentioned, have a form. We actually have that information. But you fill out the form with your information, which is required when you go to the doctor's office. Instead of having to sit there and actually write information down, they'll have that on file. So that once you get there, you get in, you pull the information, print it out, and just sign. That's it. You're good to go. It makes the process more efficient when you go to the doctor rather than having to be waiting there for a couple hours to get a form to see them or not, and you know ahead of time. So that's essentially what this office do.
So we use, Sequelize. We use Sequelize.
That's
a long pause.
Yeah. How did you generate that report?
You reverse engineer on MySQL Workbench. You reverse engineer the table you create, or the database you create.
How do you mean?
Just to get that around.
Yeah, you come here. I think it's tools. Reverse engineer under the database.
Oh, so literally, I thought you were like, I had to reverse engineer the
No.
And then
Let's pull up the binary.
Yeah. And then it should give you a list of anything, right? So ClickDoc is in our case right there. Okay. Next, execute.
Okay, and then it just shows all the
relationships. And it'll show right here. And then you manipulate them so that it makes sense, like because they'll cross over each other. You can't tell that only clients. It's a one-to-one. Clients have a user, and that user's the login info. That works, but it's not attached. Trust me.
You guys so impressive.
And also we use
But it works. But you use Sequelize for your relationships, right?
Correct. Everything was generated.
You can Sequelize and then you can, but isn't that interesting? Does everyone see how that works? You generate the relationships in your tables in Sequelize, then you can come into SQL Workbench and see the relationships you created all this.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of back and forth, making sure that the has many belongs to was actually correct to set the foreign keys.
Awesome.
Yeah, but also I just want to mention that we were working also in the session parts, authorization part with Passport and Sequelize. I personally created all the strategies and it was working before, but the thing is I started using, instead of using Thunderbus, that we had all the views for login and create an account that was working before, I just moved to Book. And I have some problems trying to recreate in time all the views to show that Passport sessions authorization with all the strategies that are working in now, but the only thing that we are missing is the view to actually show the create or login, but it's working. That's
and it would like an API call, right?
And
it would do like an API call and it would register.
Correct. It would go straight to the user database with the, and then she had a way to encrypt the password so you couldn't see what you entered.
Yeah, front end or back end?
And in the back end.
On the back end,
using a bcrypt.
Bcrypt.
I was using bcrypt. Can you show the
wireframe?
Yeah, because at first we used to have
Really
another
ambitious.
sketch.
Oh, yeah, it was a very ambitious idea. We started.
I mean, that's why we have all those tables.
Yeah, we were gonna use sales at one point. It was like, oh, this is amazing.
Sales.
Yes.
And that was.
It was amazing.
Like all those WebSockets.
If you go to sales, you go to Express, all the business application, one is sales. They are recommending sales for MVC.
Really?
Yeah, and it's really working super fine with everything implemented, the authorization, the session, everything. But the only thing we weren't able to manage is the fact that they are using as ORM something called as Waterline.
instead of SQLized.
But
Right.
can you choose the ORM you use with sales?
No.
The thing was,
I mean,
there was
you
some
can choose
instruments-
it supposedly, but
But
we
it's
was
hard.
trying
It was
hard,
very,
we was
very
trying
good,
so
and I
hard
tried,
to.
I sent a message.
Yeah,
I
there's,
go, guys, can we?
there's also a package that you supposedly can use for integrating sales, the SQLized, but it isn't working for us.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time with that.
Yeah, sales like a boat sale. So I guess it's a little bit more
Sales,
structured
yes.
than
Sales,
Express.
If you go to Express,
So, yeah, so
And my
if someone
company.
hear that, that's actually a good thing for you guys to learn. So Express, a lot of people say about Express that it's not structured enough. We're used to using other MVC frameworks. They say that Express doesn't give them enough structure and it's too hard to figure out how to organize the routes and views and models and stuff, whereas other MVCs tell you exactly where you're supposed to put stuff. Okay, so Sales is like Express, but it gives you a little bit more structure. It also uses WebSockets to send files, similar to what Firebase does, which is supposed to do. So that's something all of you may want.
we was working with sales maybe 2 days.
Trying to get SQLized to work with it.
Yeah, but that's the thing, because it's more structured, they basically sort of force you.
Yeah, they put the guides up, you have to do it that
So-
way.
That was the first mock-up that we created, but we create that based on a current application named as ASAP that is online from some people from New York, I guess. And it's using, but they are only getting information for some states, no Florida included. So we just, at first we think doctors are Miami because we can just make the same 24/7 appointments for here for
But you
Miami.
see this. I mean, tables are back there, they're ready to go.
So that was,
We got doctors, clients talking to each other.
So when the users
What is
select
that?
the doctors,
What did you use to put that together?
I was using XD.
To put together?
Yes.
Did you say Envision or?
No, XD from
Adobe XD.
Yeah, Adobe.
Okay.
And, you see, that was the original idea, to have like a schedule look like that, but,
We were trying to.
we should still probably be on the table today, but.
So you're cardiologist?
I am.
By night?
By night.
Just mentioned that
And an
special
oncologist if you check the table.
Damn, how many years you go to school?
At least
I'm really
was
50.
responsible to be just creating everything that I put there. He was really doing a good job, but at the end I finished working a Webflow, and of course he wasn't able to follow me because Webflow is another kind of crazy thing.
What is
Again,
Webflow?
Webflow is for designers
Oh,
to create everything, so you can just export all code. So at the end, you just finish and doing some modifications in the JS or CSS or whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
So we implement well.
Oh. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, we.
But can you go back to the website? I want to see the back on it. I lowered the mic so that.
Yeah, I got all the.
Oh.
Sorry.
I can almost see it, it's like.
It's like an iPad.
Something.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Is that like
okay.
a hand down
Oh,
here
yeah.
and another?
Yeah, like a nice.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
someone intelligently is
Any questions?
checking data. Yeah, any
You
questions?
guys did great. That's awesome.
Oh, I have, so when someone makes an appointment, is it just creates the appointment, or does it ask like maybe the staff to confirm or something? I can see that becoming a problem.
No, the thing is, let me explain that. We create this with a huge idea of we are gonna be creating like two layouts. So one layout is gonna be in the front part. We just think about the doctor's side. We didn't create that, and the patient side. So by now we only have the patient side, but when we actually go to create a doctor's side, the doctors are gonna have like a dashboard, also the user, but from that dashboard, the doctors will be able to upload the schedule. So when the doctors did that, the doctor is giving you authorization for the client side, for the patient to do whatever they want. I mean,
The schedule already up.
Yeah, to get
If you
around
don't
it.
want someone to book,
If you don't want someone
list
just-
your availability.
Correct, yeah, the way I got around that was dummy data.
actually, we created database logic, thinking about to have two parts, the doctor side, but also the patient side.
Okay.
So that's it.
Yeah, so It is pulling from the schedule, but it's just dummy data, because there is no doctor backend. I'm the doctor backend.
Yeah.
I inserted everything. I did it again.
A little like evil man.
Yeah, maybe like without name or something.
Yeah, Dr. Hill. Oh, I had a question actually.
Yes.
So in your, big vision, your app would be the doctor's primary like booking software.
We
right?
spoke about how
Yeah.
we would market it
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that hey, you're gonna be visible to a lot of people,
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the main idea.
That's the main thing.
and then we take a percentage of our books.
Of course.
I mean, you said monthly
Right.
fee.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna have a lot of it. Yeah. So we think it has.
So you can only pull up doctors that are associated with
with
you.
that app.
App, yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
You know, we take the first 5 and hey, we do a break to see if it gives you more
We're
points.
thinking about to show also all the doctors available,
Mhm.
but not the schedule. I mean, just
Mm,
grab
I
the,
see, for
grab the
like a
doctor's
special-
information
okay,
from
okay, I
the
see.
API,
Yeah.
but if you wanna just schedule with one,
Yeah.
has to be in our database.
Ah, okay. Okay, that's cool.
Great, cool. I'll answer the
Okay.
question. I'll answer the question.
Yes.
Okay.
Just one, because I would think moving forward, I would think the other feature you want to add to the app is for patients to be able to send some of the basic insurance information ahead of time, because that usually can eat up a good chunk of time in the waiting room, just trying to log in the insurance, verify, and so forth.
So that is part of what we have.
We
already created as
have
well.
a form object
Yeah.
in the table, and when the patient logs in, one of the fields he has to fill out is the insurance carrier.
Okay.
He has to do that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you thought about like HIPAA compliance with all of that?
That was HIPAA
HIPAA?
compliant.
Yeah.
Compliant, yes, so that definitely is something that's important. But again, when you create, it's gonna be password protected and everything else. Once
You
you
all-
fill out information, it's gonna be required to put on there, obviously, it will be encrypted. So it just takes the time.
Right, because the doctor's the only one that is allowed to see that, right? Through HIPAA, is that what you're saying?
You actually need a special HIPAA compliant cloud storage server. If you want to do it, that your server has to be configured specially to be HIPAA compliant, which is why these companies like, what's the company that does the HIPAA compliance? Oh no, Alex knew about it, not you. Alex works at a company that does HIPAA compliant storage, and there's another one that's in Miami called CloudCare, yeah. That does that, but you would have to go through one of those types of companies. Rackspace also does HIPAA compliant storage. I talked to a Rackspace engineer at a convention once who was telling me about all the things they had to do for HIPAA compliant storage. And there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to follow those laws that doesn't necessarily match up with the way we do things visually, or just like you would think intuitively because something's encrypted and password protected, it's going to be HIPAA compliant, but it isn't. So there's a lot that actually goes into making electronic products HIPAA compliant. So that was actually going to be my one question for you guys too, because you would kind of need that piece if you're going to go live with it. But it'd probably be just as easy as requisitioning some type of a cloud that's already compliant. Jonathan, feedback.
I like the whole concept of what you guys had. I feel like you guys were working maybe a little bit too much on the design and on the back end, the database and all that, that you didn't allow yourself to work or get enough time to work on the actual app itself. Which sucks because by the designs, it looked great. And if you would have presented with like just that patient side, the same front end that you guys had at the mock-ups, I think that would have been great. It's good that you guys have back end, all the database structures and the relationships, but you can't really do much without, the front end, the API code and all that. So kind of sucks. I would have loved to seen that all kind of put together, at least for the patient side, that would be great. But
Yeah, I think it was a really good product. I think it's useful. I mean, there are a lot of things in the medical industry that are still very much like pen and paper and stuff. So there's a lot of room to make electronic solutions that will improve things, and I think it's a good example of that. So I like it.
Yeah.
Good job. Okay, let's see who's next. Drum roll, please. We have right, we have Michael, Jackie P. Wait, no. Sorry. We have Sam Falcon, John Cho.
Come on, John. Come on, John. John Charles. Do you want to show me that?
I can pull up the map one.
I'm hungry. Anybody want hamburgers?
I didn't look into this. Can you look at the information that's stored in a JAWS DB server? Okay. Okay, no. What?
No, JAWS is for when you have data going to the.
Oh, you guys have music on
Oh,
too?
okay.
No.
We have a whole fire
Why is it-
presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Dude.
Holy, is that part of your presentation?
It's supposed to be playing right now.
Yeah.
You're walking through fire.
Here, you know what? I'll just do
Oh, better.
Maybe I should have started this while you guys were giving feedback.
Is the projector off? What did you guys move? What did you guys do? You just pulled it out?
Turn it off. I had the same problem. Just turn it off and turn it back on.
I figured I was eventually gonna get to that.
The Devils moved from Georgia.
We made a music app. It plays music.
Wake up! I'm so happy you're over here.
If you want, I can. No, never mind.
I know, right? I was just about to take my hair.
Oh, yeah. What's his name? The Ricky Billionaire guy? Yeah.
I know, right? That would be so funny. Like, you know, what's when they, is it crowd surf?
Yeah.
Crowd surf. Now it's warming up.
Oh my god, I could never try that. I know of people who have done that before. And I'm like,
You know what's crazy?
I have the hardest.
I didn't think it is hard. This is probably the hardest part of our project.
I think it's like a dip in the thing, so they like release the crowd surfer on me.
Holy
Oh my god! There's like a dip in the.
Huh?
Yeah,
The projector's warming up.
Oh, then you shut it
It's
off?
getting warmed up.
No.
Go for it.
As long as you don't walk.
Or don't trip any of those.
There we go.
I mean, a couple times because I was there with somebody else who was short. So
Almost warm.
Yeah, does no one have like a
Like
phone with an
lukewarm.
IR blaster?
What do you need?
A phone with an IR blaster.
Is that remote? Like, what's
What
do you need?
Phone with an IR blaster.
What's that remote for?
I don't know. It's not batteries. No, you got it. Yo.
Wait, maybe that button.
Hold on.
Screen.
Open your device.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I do something right
Hey, these phones like that anymore.
Unfortunately.
It's so useful.
Here, set it up.
Oh, shoot.
Use a projector.
But you used it before, right?
I want extra credit.
seems like it's off.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Got it.
There you go.
Cool.
Alright, now let me make it.
I can change the resolution.
No, my phone is a built-in IR glass, so I can use it.
Make it show a minute.
We need to make it work.
It's good.
It's good. It's good. It's good.
Wait for Don.
We gotta wait for John.
Yeah, because he has to give the main feedback.
And the grades.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of.
It's a collective.
No, quick,
Alright,
let's finish.
I misspoke.
Stop.
Wouldn't it be better to put my hand projector pointing at it and see the screen?
Is that better? That's the easy feel.
No,
I
I
think.
think.
Oh,
Oh, I was just like, creepy, you lost sleep. This looks good.
What?
You're that cousin of Mark.
That's
awesome.
Okay.
You're like that cousin of
Hey,
Mark.
Sam, keep using that.
How we doing? We're leaving?
Alright, Lucky. He doesn't know what a mosh pit is.
What?
You don't have to log in.
Look it.
Oh,
that's
okay.
the thing. I don't know how do you say this.
That's good.
Trust me,
Oh.
Fire log out.
Everybody jumps around.
No.
No, mosh pit is more than just jumping around. You're like dragging each other. Come out with a few bruises.
Oh,
Wait, no, we
generating.
Who did that?
Oh, is that you?
No, I didn't do anything.
Oh, I was like, you taking advantage of the remote?
I mean, actually,
No, but for real, I didn't do anything.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, just look at it like that. That's a lot better. Cool. That's a lot better. Yeah. Wow.
But you don't need the top part. So that should be fine.
Yeah, you don't.
Am I wrong?
This is how our app works.
Hey, there we go. There we go. Oh my god.
Oh,
That's
man.
fun. There we go. You can draw on the screen now. You can point the stuff
There
visually.
you go.
That's great.
That's
Yeah,
easy
do it like that.
to see.
That's an interactive.
Yeah.
Actually, that's how it would have worked on the other one.
Lolo, you ready?
Yeah. Okay, Amir, you can start. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know if you're gonna have to or-
Oh,
let's start.
What can I start?
Alright, hi guys, I'm Yumio. My teammates Martha, John, and Sam. There you go. Well, when we first started this group, we had one idea in mind, and it's solving a problem. We obviously know there's a lot of problems in the world, but we wanted to stick to something a little more smaller. We went around our group and figured out which is the problem that we're facing in our daily routines. Sam had the worst one, so we figured we gotta solve his problem first. I guess you can log in and then we can go from there.
Yeah.
Our idea was all based on task logging, and it was basically a task logger with an invoice generator. It's so you can work with the employees and the accounting firm at the same time. Here, let me log in and we can go from there. You want to give them a little demo on the?
Yeah. So I work at South Florida Diving Headquarters, and we get paid per task that we complete. We have a few different types of tasks that we do on a daily basis. So let's say I need to fill some tanks. I just open up the tanks group and I filled 5 more tanks, and I filled 3 more enriched air tanks. That's what that is. And I also crewed on the boat today, so I crewed Safari Diver, and I also crewed on the other boat for the afternoon trip. And then because I am just a boss, I also taught a class.
Damn, I need to be a diver.
Yeah, that's very unrealistic, but
Now keep in mind that all this data too is it's once you see popular appears all real time. So if he adds 1 or 2 or 3, it automatically gets sent to the database and you see the results there.
Yeah.
So there's no need of having to click a button and generate.
There's no submit button. I figured, in the break between a morning trip and an afternoon trip, pardon my French, but shit is hitting the fan. And we have to fill tanks and get all the stuff off of one boat and get all the stuff onto another boat and all that stuff. And we just don't have time to be sitting there filling out a form. Or what currently we do is we write on a piece of paper what we did. Yeah, that's.
Let's see.
Now the functionality too is that when users like Sam log in, they have certain roles. You know, some people have options to be in the admin, so they get certain preferences depending on the role assigned to them.
So this is another user who has different roles.
Some don't have the admin page, some don't. They can't see all the tasks that all the employees have done. So they're limited. So their main objective is to do their tasks and send it over to the accounting department.
Yeah. So you notice I'm not a captain yet. There wasn't this captain boats thing right here, but my buddy Chris, he is a captain, so he can log that he crewed a boat, or that he captained a boat.
You can go back to the admin. We can show them the rest.
Yeah. So log out.
And we use Passport for our user authentication. Yeah.
All right, so I can see what I've done this week.
And that's just for that specific user.
And I can also go to the previous week. So that's for me the pawn, so to speak. I can see my tasks and I can also log them, and I can reset my password if I need to. Now my account is also an admin account, so I also have this admin screen where I can create new users if we hire another person, make changes to users, create new roles and groups of tasks and assign them accordingly. And then we also have our payroll screen. I also gave myself the payroll
Yeah, so you can look for, depending on what employee, it'll already tally up everything they've done so far for the week or the day.
Yeah. So I want to see what Chris has been up to this week, so I can pay him. And here's my my report, and I can see what he did last week or next week.
Yeah, I mean, our rule is having a little more functionality. For example, in the updates, so when the user or the employee gets paid, they get an update saying, look, this is what you've been paid. We were gonna add some little more functionality because they're divers. A little simple weather app so they can see, weather. I guess it doesn't really matter because they're outside, so they can just look. But
you want to
double make sure that.
Well, I live in Weston. Yeah, I live in Weston, and I drive like an hour to Pompano, maybe a little less than that, but I don't know what the weather's like in Pompano.
Martha and Chao explain more about the front end. They did the designing and the structuring for this whole platform.
Yeah, so we created something, we used material design, and we wanted something that it was very easy for the users to put the information. So this is how it will look in the computer, and it will be responsive in their phones.
Was this built from a template, Martha, or?
Yes,
Okay.
from material design.
Okay.
And we added, the bits for the future functionality, like you said, the updates and the weather. And tasks were added depending on the role of the person. Their payroll, or admin, they will get all these tasks, but the employees won't. And the idea is not only to maximize like the efficiency of the employee, but also for the employer. To have it one place instead of a million different papers from each employee, just one place where they know, okay, this person is the most productive, this person is not productive, and they can track also that through the payroll. So.
Yeah, and I know you guys are thinking, oh wow, there's so many apps out there that do the same thing. In this case, it was more in execution. A lot of apps do the same thing, but it's about tailored execution. That's what we did for Sam. We wanted it specifically tailored to his company and for the needs that they have. Obviously, a lot of these roles are, tough words, so they can be phrased differently in terms of like roles of, what teachers or their responsibilities and their tasks and so on and so on. So this app, future, we thought would make it a little more, changeable. You could update what kind of company you have, and depending on that company, the roles and so on and so on. So it's very universal, you can say. But that's, future development from that. But so far we have.
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I don't think it's a bad thing that there are other apps that do the same thing. Like for me, it doesn't have to be new; it just has to be better. And I think
Well,
like
that's what I'm
having
saying.
that like that
It's tailored,
is a
specifically.
lot better, and I think the app looks really nice.
Sorry if I missed it, but what data sets are you using for the app?
So we're using the Sequelize ORM, and we're storing stuff on JAWSDB, and Express for the routing. Does that answer your question?
Can you guys show your database schema
Yeah,
yet? Because that wasn't pretty.
Wait, how did you guys host it immediately on JAWSDB? I thought like you start off with MySQL and then go to JAWS.
We did.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
we started off with MAMP.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, that's why I told them.
Sorry. Okay.
Did we break this screen, by the way?
No, it looks better without the.
Oh, we decided.
Believe it or not, yeah. I don't know why.
Yeah, you did that really
Oh, I got scared for a second. Okay, so this is what it looks like. We've got users, the roles that the users have, the groups of tasks that we assign to the roles, the tasks that are put in groups, and then individual entries for a task that is logged, and then 3 relational tables for the many-to-many relationship.
Right. So this is really impressive that you guys got this to work. We'll get the feedback, but this is great that you got this to work, because I saw like how complicated this database structure was, and I was like, are you really going to be able to get this done? But it worked pretty well, and it was pretty simple. I don't know, did you do the suggestions I made for you for the lookup, where you look up all, or you had to do all tasks by role?
No, I actually figured out how to do it with my many-to-many relationship.
Okay, perfect.
And just created a whole bunch of API calls.
We'll get a
that I
lesson
could
on
use.
it in the future. So everybody could.
It might not. I mean, yeah, and you can always make these things more and more efficient too.
Yeah.
So like you might show it to me, and I say no. You can have done it in a
Yeah.
more efficient way, and that's always the way these things are. And that doesn't mean that you did it wrong. It just means that it can always be more efficient. And usually a rule of thumb is like get it to work first, and then try to make it more and more efficient as you go.
The other thing I'll say is that when I was having that problem, it wasn't the Sequelize. I discovered that it was just figuring out how to get Passport to talk with the SQL database.
Yeah, so we know which
Right.
users logged in, which data corresponds to that user, and so
Right. Okay.
That was a big challenge.
Good. Yeah, you guys did a lot of good work on this. I'm impressed.
Going off that really quick, I have a question. What was your templating in?
Materialize, right?
Yeah, Materialize.
No, like we're using Pug, we're using handlebars, or just like HTML.
No, it was just HTML.
So like
That-
for each role, you guys have different HTML pages. If they were admin, if they were right.
For each different screen, the change password, so you're right. There's 5 different screens that could be accessed. Yeah, and each one had its own.
Yeah, it had a
Yes,
div,
you're right.
and then there was
That
a
could have been
JS
done better.
file that would populate the information.
Yeah, so I mean, you guys could have used standards, but you got a lot of work done in a very short period of time.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
Okay. Any other questions? Give me a hand. Feedback.
You guys be careful of those boards.
Yeah, you know what? I'll just put this away. Done with it.
Okay, good job. As I said, I was impressed you guys were able to get the database schema working. That was good. It looks really good. Martha, I think you did a good job with material design. Is that something you would like to keep working with now? Because you were looking for something that did basically that, right?
Yeah,
material design.
I
And this is your
showed
first
to
time
me,
working.
yeah, the first time I wanted to, because it has, creates a lot more stuff than just Bootstrap, like how it works, and yeah, we'll continue to.
Okay. Yeah, that was good. I like the design. I like the back end. You really did a good job on the presentation. I liked it that you told it in sort of a narrative format where you said we had a problem and then here's how we solved it. Here's how we overcame it. That's actually how they teach people to get through them. Got that really well. Jonathan?
No, you guys did a phenomenal job. There's a lot of features. Does that all work? Like the adding users, changing roles?
Everything works.
Really?
The
Wow.
only thing that doesn't work was just when they get paid. know, the update section.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Other than that, everything on that
So
worksheet.
nothing is hard coded, like the payment, like the invoice comes from the database based on payment.
Yeah,
everything is
exactly.
already,
Okay.
and it's just the JS file and the copy.
Great, okay, well, that's very impressive. Good, yeah.
I mean, Sam was like the architect of the database, and without his skills, we definitely could not complete it.
Good job.
But it was all group effort.
Good, good. Good.
Nothing bad. I mean, the design.
Oh, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
The
there's
logo
things
might have
like
been a
that.
little
We could've
tricky.
we could've always been nitty-gritty, but it seems to be working well. I'm impressed that you got the relational part of the database to work, because that's something that people struggle with, is getting like the relationships to work, and you took that to like the utmost extreme of getting really, really relational database. So, yeah, I thought that was good, and it was sort of necessary, even though it seemed kind of like overcomplicated when you were doing it, it did serve a necessary kind of task to have a little separated.
I didn't like the answer, this is complicated, so you should do it, or simplify it to where it doesn't do what you want it to do.
Right, yeah, and that's important, and when you guys build out products, you will get into these situations where you have complicated database relationships. Mongo will make it a little bit easier in some cases, but it's good to really put in the effort and try to get it done, even though it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, one thing about material design that I liked also, it was like, since it was adding so much features, it was very easy to just add a class, and it will just, you know, all the
Make it look the
information,
same, yeah.
every new query, new functionality will already fit with using that, because then we will just add that.
I have a question. Did you use material design or like one of the libraries that uses like material design, like Advisor?
No, material design.
So you installed it like in the back?
No, I downloaded like the template, and then I started looking at the components and changing them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
The
it was
fastest
done.
way, and like we had a lot of tables, so I looked into the different, you know, attributes of the table and in the documentation that they have, and now we just like work with it. But that way, you know, as they were adding, it was just changing one thing on the CSS file, and it would do a lot of this kind of work, you know.
Okay, good job, guys. Drum roll, please. Mario.
Falcon.
Team Falcon. Okay, next we have Mario Ricard, Adrian, Pedro, Melvin. There we go.
Does something with that.
Sure, we don't want to change.
Yeah,
okay?
no.
Okay.
Give me one.
Okay, Fortress.
Pick one.
Why are you called Team Fortress? There's Fortress.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it was my idea. Yeah, I was inspired by Jonathan again. Jonathan Morrow. Thank you.
Sounds comic book inspired.
No, it was gonna be the 4 horsemen because we're 4 men.
Okay.
And it's because the first time I was gonna do it all men,
Yeah.
and it's the second time I'm gonna do it all
No way,
women.
that's funny.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Although to your credit, that's also the name of a game. Team Fortress. Why is that displayed?
Early on the same issue. No, your display is
Turn off the projector and turn it back on again.
Does it clap on?
Wait, hold on.
No,
Which?
Or try to switch it.
Completely turn it off?
Give me your phone, just do it with your phone.
What, turn off the projector?
Yeah, we did, that's what I fixed, I was able to fix it.
What happened?
You need an IR blast from the phone.
Oh, what?
IR blaster.
Oh.
No phone seems to do it.
They don't have like a remote somewhere?
There we go.
Oh, because that remote is not a thing.
It's not remote.
Turn on.
It's a laser pointer.
Um,
I think everybody
oh, I think that might be it. That right there.
But we have the
Anyway,
regular
we have-
display thing anyway.
We have the IR blaster.
Okay, did you turn off and turn back on again?
Yeah, we'll try it now.
For now, waiting for it to turn on.
It's warming up.
Man, that's such a good thing.
It might work just to switch it to PC and then back to laptop. Can you try that, Sam?
Yeah.
Does that mean that we get to leave early?
Because that's the other thing that goes wrong. We can't leave early.
Come on, you can make it right.
Okay, you can leave early if you decide running from the
No.
government isn't important.
No, you gotta make it feel better. I'm not the only one making it for the record. Yeah.
Copy said she wants to do more.
Your idea is that.
Yes, look at what he said.
No, it's already off.
I asked him if we could leave early, he said no.
We can present next time.
More programming.
No, I'm playing a game right now,
Still
so
gets
I don't, programming can wait.
Are you finding out information about STDs?
Yeah, I'm down
Let's
with
play
that.
to find out information about STDs.
You can't eat during the presentation, man. What's wrong with you?
Like, phone app?
We brought chips for everyone.
Yeah,
Please, like
one
us.
way, and then phone graph, there's something called phone graph that will turn into JavaScript. A lot of
Actually, we
apps
didn't get that function to work.
and then they just have a wrapper.
That happens every time.
Oh, yeah.
So phone graph takes your.
Oh, there it is. There you go.
Get out of that app so you don't touch it.
It's my phone, fool.
I'm just actually.
Why is that? Okay. Did you hit a button?
You hit a button.
You hit a button.
Everybody hit a button.
I think that would be.
What does this button do?
For this thing.
No, don't start.
Oh, the thing is like quicker.
Can you make like icons? I guess that would just be a style.
So you wanted to start with
Like an icon.
Doesn't work. You gotta wait for this to go on and then you go like this and then.
I'm gonna just do that.
That's
Exactly.
the actual motion.
Yeah, it goes like this.
It's like playing with a remote. You just have to swing it and
The
you do
user
what you want.
experience is amazing.
There you go.
Wait.
That's not, yeah, that.
Wait, that's my settings. That's my settings.
That's this computer. So change it to laptop.
There you go.
Buongiorno, principessa.
Okay.
That's.
There we go. That is not the time. Go.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, ready? Okay, guys, we're on Team Fortress. We got Pedro and me, Fabian. Fabian, Mario, and we got Melvin.
How do you do?
Nice to meet you too, Mr. Falcon. And he's not Falcon. Okay, guys. Like I said, we're Team Fortress. We built. Well, first of all, I'd like to say again, thank you. If no one heard before, we almost called the group Four Horsemen. Because Jonathan keeps putting us in groups with only men. So I appreciate that, sir. Thank you. But we're about to embark into the very exciting, action-packed world of JavaScript. So go, Mel.
So our app was made with the mentality that everybody's always trying to improve within their own respective fields. For authors, sometimes they have like a word of the day calendar. Eminem try to read a bunch of new words in the dictionary every night for hours to add more vocabulary to in his songs. So we figured something similar would be applicable to coders because there's a multitude of different methods in any given language that is very, very hard to cover any one of them in their entirety. So with this app in particular, Almanac.js, is kind of like a method of the day app. So you go to the website and it'll randomly generate from our database a method for the from a total of 365 methods that we have within the database.
Wow.
Not even joking, 365. And it'll randomly generate it onto here, onto the website. We'll give you a general description, the syntax and how it's presented.
Sorry, how many methods were on MDN? Do you guys know? That you could have taken?
Methods it was 360. It returned 369,
Oh, okay.
and it was 450 pages, but some of them were mismatched. Apparently, the information that they dynamically populate wasn't very.
Oh, okay. And so there are 365.
So there's 365. There's a lot of ambiguities because for example, add, there's 4 different add. You can use add on arrays, on different handlers. So we handle that by using categories, which we also pulled from the scraper, but I'll get to the data later, Melvin.
Yes. So from there, just give you a description of how the actual method works within JavaScript, and it'll actually provide an iframe down here to give you an example of how to actually use it within your own application.
You can run this. Right. Well, what did you guys use for that?
MDN has that. They have that on each of their pages for most of the methods. Some of them don't have them, which you'll probably see.
So to embed that?
Huh?
To embed that?
They have it embedded on their website, and that link is the scraper just took it right off their.
Okay, got it. So if you wanted to get just more than one method for the given day, you can go back up to the top and hit the random method button right here, and it'll give you a new one to actually look up. Now, they won't always generate an example. Unfortunately, we were trying to narrow that down a little bit. Long story short, sometimes they just don't have one available for it. But on
the idea there was to dynamically through handlebars generate that example box, but we have a couple of issues with it.
But also, just to expand a little bit beyond the simple method of the day functionality, we want to make it a little bit more of a communal resource. So we have, as you can see right here, the like and the dislike buttons right here, that any of the users can go here to kind of help give a general rating, because sometimes you find a method within JavaScript that yeah, it does what you want it to, but it may not be the best way to go about doing it, like switch cases and if-then statements. That's kind of the idea behind the like and dislikes. And then unfortunately, we didn't really get the chance to get it implemented, but we had also the idea at the bottom for making comments. So things just like that, like switch cases versus if-then statements, stuff like that could be generated by users when they see this method, and kind of have other developers have an idea of how to use it or when they were actually used. So someone could just briefly say, oh, I used this in my project for a coding bootcamp, and it ended up doing for the databases, and so forth. So it gives you the individuality to be able to improve upon yourself, but also at the same time a level of communal resources that you may not otherwise get from other websites like W3 Schools. I'm going to pass it over to Fabian and Pedro, and they can kind of go over how we did the UI.
Yeah, for the UI, for CSS, we use the Materialize over on Bootstrap. I personally like it a lot more. I think it has a larger library of resources. Like, it has a ton of icons if you want to create like a form button. It looks fancier, it looks, more appealing. I just think it's very detailed and it's simplified. For instance, you could target something in HTML and say, make the text white, make the background blue, and that's it. So I love it because it's very simple, straightforward. And
yeah, I was working on the sketches, and when I first started using Bootstrap because it was what I know. Before Mario mentioned Materialize, I have no idea what it was. So when I switched to I came up with one sketch or two mockups, not sketches. I came up with 1,000 sketches. But to use the when I started creating the mockups, I did like 1 or 2 using Bootstrap, and when I started using Materialize, I kind of went off the rails because I started doing like circles and universe. And
you realize it was much quicker.
It is quicker, and
he had much more and quicker designs.
Yeah,
so it was actually.
Yeah, and also the colors is what I think is the most. It was what I like the most about Materialize. The colors is like 1,000 colors.
Yeah.
I mean, Bootstrap only have 1, 2.
It has different. It has, like I said, large library. It has different variations of even the same color, which could make a big difference in the visual appearance.
And when we're talking different variations of the same color, I say Bootstrap have like 2, 3 of the same color. Materialize have like the full page,
like 10 variations.
Yeah, like 10 variations, and it's by Google. So, yeah, that's good.
Right. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the bread and butter of this, which is the information. It's the most important to it because that's what we're looking at, right? The actual methods. We actually put together a scraper to scrape MDN from scratch, and we're also going to make that available. If if any of you guys want to use it. We actually laid it out pretty simple. Like you just give it a URL, and then it has a section where you can input and select the tags and identify the pattern that you want to scrape, and then just build the selector functions, and it outputs that out for you pretty nicely. Just let me know if you guys need access to that. It's in my GitHub as well. Getting all that information together, basically that's what it is. Identifying the patterns, where it is, pulling it in. Obviously, MySQL doesn't allow objects or arrays or anything like that, like Mongo would. So we had to, stringify all that data going in and then parse it coming out, and that gave a little bit of issues too. Some of the fields were too short as we originally set them up, and it would cut the object in half, and parsing it was a whole nightmare. But we got through it, and we got the main idea working. We didn't get everything that we wanted to on the screen for you guys. We had authorization. We wanted to have a logging in here on the loading footer, but you guys get the idea. For the future, ways we were discussing on how to expand, we wanted to also implement this to, for example, NPM packages. There's a ton of NPM packages that you never heard of, and they're really useful. And even just looking at an NPM package that you didn't know could do that, or that was already out there, could even give you an idea for a new app. So maybe adding more things to the same concept, and going off of there. Pretty much that's all there is. Does anybody have any questions?
Great idea. I would use it.
I saw you guys had like a comment section. When you guys put in a comment, how do I know who put the comment? You guys have like a form?
Well, pretty much that's why we couldn't implement the comments, because if we couldn't implement the auth, the only other way was to put in a field for name and the message that you want to input, and we run into a couple of problems that limited, how much time we wanted to put into.
No, I think it makes sense, because I mean, with an auth, what do you say?
Right, exactly.
You want to see what
the auth that we had set up, which we actually got working, it was just a matter of implementation. We were using Passport for OAuth, and we were using, since it's for developers, obviously, you can sign in and sign up and sign in with GitHub, which I thought was pretty cool, and we got it to work. We just couldn't put it together at the end. Yeah.
And pretty much created everything from that. Hey, look at this. Look at this guy.
It's like one out.
Right? He did this for you.
Hey, thank you, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just thought it was funny how you jumped up and down in the beginning, because I actually literally put it
right.
I like how
What was the package that you used? I used Request, and I think Fabian or Melvin suggested, I can't remember who, it was Cheerio, to parse the data. It gives you access on the back end like jQuery. Like you use jQuery on the client side, you can use jQuery on the back end to get access all the selectors and all the data.
Does the search work?
The search, unfortunately, does not work because of the ambiguity. It was returning errors. At the end, we had the idea of adding like a drop-down selector where you can select the actual category and dynamically populate it. So you can put object and then search for a method for objects. Again, we tried to focus on the main idea to get at least something to show you guys.
And due to some complications, we kind of had some misused time for to say it nicely. So we didn't have the time to actually move this out of the actual DOM in the end.
One more. I know you were working with some really cool animations. Did it ever make it into the?
We couldn't put it all together because all the JavaScript was cheap.
JavaScript.
And I'm not. Oh yeah, JavaScript.
I like that.
And I'm not.
That sounds like a name of an app.
Yeah. And I was supposed to do that part because of Mario had to do, but obviously I'm not great with JavaScript, so that would take me another week to get that done. So that's why we just.
Because we had, as Mario's been explaining, we had more ambitions to kind of expand this much further than what it actually is at the moment. But due to some complications, we had to we were trying to use an ORM from the beginning, and then we ended up switching to SQLize because it ended up making more sense, a lot more simple, much more streamlined to actually get everything integrated in a timely manner. So There is a lot that we would have liked to have implemented or built upon, but this was ultimately what we could get to.
Feedback. Okay. I thought you guys did a great job. You worked together well. It seemed like from the beginning you picked up this project. The tech seemed good. I'd like to see your scraper, Mario. It seems like your database. I mean, the database obviously for this is pretty straightforward since all it is really one table of events or
Those comments and replies. And
Oh yeah, there's comments, but you would never finish that in 2 weeks because what will happen is you'll get spammers, and then you have to figure out what to do about the spammers, and that's why most professional websites use a third-party service for comments. There's a lot of unforeseen stuff that happens there. So yeah, I would not expect you guys to get that done in 2 weeks. But yeah, I thought it was a useful product. I liked it how you have the thumbs up and thumbs down and all of that. I thought the design looked good. I liked it how you guys had the back and forward buttons at one point, and they were supposed to slide over, but I guess you weren't able to get all of them figured out in time. John?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, is there something else like that for like methods and stuff like JavaScript? No, nothing at all really.
We actually, I can't remember if we in the final master bench, I pushed it, but we have an API that we're putting out as well. So if you want to use a list of all the APIs and their descriptions, you can pull from that as well because I couldn't find it.
Yeah, so this one, so pretty much you build something completely
Nice.
that doesn't exist.
Okay. One thing about the dislike and like buttons that I noticed is that you could do like multiple of them, or you can keep clicking one. It would have been nice to see like you click one and blocks there, you can't keep clicking plus, or you can't dislike.
Right.
And then it also would have been nice to see for the examples, so some of them don't have examples. It would have been nice to like maybe see that whole block like resize down and say like no examples found. Would you like to add one or something? It doesn't have to work, but just like see that resize. That would have been nice to see instead of just keeping the empty block.
We just said about the plus and minus that could have maybe been done with local storage or something, even if they don't have authorization.
Yeah, and even it could have done with just JavaScript. Once you click one, you disable the other two, or it's not too complicated for that. But
you would have to pull back if you already disliked it. When you like it, it would have to pull back the dislike.
Right.
Or moving at that point.
Right. So, other than that, great job.
Yeah.
Team left.
One team left, then we get to do more programming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we can add the option to the lever.
I thought you wanted to.
Everyone's like on 1 hour
stay.
If my computer died, I also lost my charger. Who's the last one to go? Okay, team that hasn't go. Team that hasn't gone. That's it? You guys are only three? Okay.
Oh, yeah, there's always a team.
Adrian Russell Band, what's your team name?
Underman.
Underman. Say it. Let's give them a round of applause for Underman.
It looks like you guys are Overman. Just saying. I mean, you got one guy who's already got a job doing
Man or man?
That's
Underman.
Are you a
Boy.
straight?
You're not related.
So how much?
I can imagine that.
Go ahead.
My friend is graduating.
You guys do here.
We had this on the cloud, so.
Oh,
we can do it on here.
Yeah,
we're good.
That's all I was like, oh, yeah. I guess I am.
No, that's something to try.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Is HDMI to HDMI?
And you're waiting on the line for like 40 minutes.
Wait, what was everyone else using?
My boss.
Yeah.
Like, if someone put these on
Oh, wait, do we need where's the is the only available port I'm sorry, PGA?
Yeah, but we have an adapter.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Okay.
We have lots of adapters.
We're gonna bust files. Just come here. Yes, adapters with more.
No.
Oh, those are all yours?
They're legal. But I wouldn't be dumb enough to shoot them. It's like imagine a horse. And that's it.
Thank you. That was good.
Great job, guys.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. We'd like to present Tasky. And what is Tasky is just a simple, elegant, productive, productivity app focused on helping you get stuff. Pretty much the task manager. And so we base our concept on something joyful, simple, for doing the time management for people who want to be not involved with complex tools like Asana or Basecamp. Just a simple task can be approached playful way. That you're watching on the so extra credit. We wanted to make the best course and learn new technologies and challenge ourselves with new ways to produce things. And
Are those real manatees? Why do they look so mean?
What?
Don't they?
You came to the wrong neighborhood.
Give me your wallet.
Give me your what we have in our hearts. So, what you can do with tasks? So you can ask tasks. You can set your time and see the progress where you are working. If you don't like the task, you can erase it, erase that much. And we also have alerts just in case you pass the well, the user interface, we went from the wireframing section just to come up with the ideas about it. And that was very helpful for us to accomplish what we have as the main interface. I told you it was very simple, straight to the point, and very modern, just that. The user's life. And then we assume some technologies like material design, Bootstrap, Mocha, Angular, so on, so on. So
you used Angular.
What
One
was
up everyone in
Decrypt
here.
used for? Encrypting passwords? Decrypt?
What are you still doing here? Just kidding.
good.
All right. So you want to demo this? You can demo this.
We'll load. There we go. Oh, you had a login and stuff.
We need to sign up.
I want to sign up.
Alright.
I'm sorry, I'm set up.
Alright, so this is all done with no Bootstrap, no jQuery, none of that. We don't verify to make sure you're using like an actual email. We do check to make sure it fits
email, make sure it looks like an email.
You don't get an email verification?
So this is all just pure CSS?
No, this is, he's actually signing up the user for the database.
Yeah, I know, but, no
What's the-
bootstrap, no materialize, nothing like that. Is it responsive?
Ooh.
To an extent. Oh,
Not really, no, it's not
that
responsive.
Media query.
Oh, we were just there.
Oh, no.
And then just log in.
Take a second.
Use password, right?
No, Jason Web Token. And, yeah, and Decrypt.
All right, so this is all dynamically generated. There's no AJAX calls. We're using Fetch API to make all the requests here using the Angular HTTP client. You're able to go in here. You can change the task name. So you can put in a task description. This all persists, so you can should be able to refresh the page in a perfect world. But we can log in again. And that's all there. You can, we can click the timer to change the due date. So we'll keep it there. We'll make this simply, let's do 12:45. It'll still be PM. Alright, the new task. Well, no. Alright, well, on my computer it was. It had a progress bar that is basically, so what we're doing on the client side is calculating the seconds between when the task is first created and when the due date is set, and then it's basically converting that into a percentage that should be displayed by the progress bar. And the progress bar, in theory, would be green when you are above 60% task or above 50% task completion. Once you're at the 50% mark, the progress bar is yellow, and once you're below 20%, the task bar is red. And then, of course, you can delete your tasks as well. Oh yeah, and you can complete your task. When you complete a task, it'll turn blue. That way you know which one's completed, which one's not.
Okay. So I was mostly responsible for the back end. These are the tests that I did for each one of the API routes. I had tests for all of them, seeded the data. So before each one of these tasks, seeded the test database and then populated with dummy data. So 2 users and 2 tasks per user. 1 user was authenticated, 1 wasn't. So the unauthenticated user will not be able to type tasks, for example. This is done with Nota and Superintendent. And go back. So I use JSON web tokens, Decrypt, to authenticate the users. JSON web tokens is to hash the password. So when the user logs in or registers, you don't actually save the password to our database. You save the hash version of the password, JSON web tokens. And then Decrypt we use for further encryption. So one of the problems with JSON web token is that could, I guess, reverse engineer the password. So you can brute force the JSON web tokens and get like 1 million hash passwords. And if you see the hash password, you can basically reverse engineer the password by saying the table of 1 million dummy hash passwords. So use Decrypt to solve the password, which is essentially adding additional rounds of encryption. So the NSA can't even hack this thing.
So what is the purpose of using JSON web token? You're encrypting the password.
So, I think Decrypt is just to add those further rounds of encryption. The original one
shouldn't need any more
Yeah.
encryption than that if you do like a SHA-256.
Yeah, because you could set the amount of salts and hashes that you do with bcrypt, like the amount of
Well, I
rounds.
did that with bcrypt. Are you saying I can just delete it, JSON web tag?
Yeah, bcrypt
I
does
didn't know that.
everything, the full fledged encryption, and you can set how like strong you want the encryption to be.
Yeah, I'd set it to 10 for me, but
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I thought you needed JSON web tag as well. Okay, well, I use both. That's it. I mean, this is obvious. We got 3 people. We had a week, so we obviously had more things that we wanted to accomplish, but those are the next steps.
Looks great.
And this is actually kind of interesting because I actually published to my own Heroku, and Dan published to his own Heroku as well. And he's actually taking API calls from my Heroku production. So we actually have 2 of them. Yes.
Questions for them?
It's not much of a question, it's more like praise. I think the app looks beautiful, the logo is amazing, but also like in slide 14, you only put like 2 things for further development. I actually think you could take it a step further and perhaps think about integrating with timers such as Toggle or something else to see how much time a task would take. Because I actually think this is real world application.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things you want to really add is actually having a user profile dashboard. So on top of just creating tasks and stuff, you can go to your profile, you can see like completed tasks and something like that. Like being able to calculate how much time a task would take would be definitely something that would be super useful and definitely something we could implement.
Is it possible the progress bar wasn't working because you were creating a blank task and then adding the details afterwards?
No, I mean,
I'm not sure.
It was all working like literally when class started.
Okay.
So who knows? But the way it is it's just every time that you click out of anything, when you essentially blur from whatever input you're at, it automatically updates the task and does a patch to the server's API.
And that's that milestone that we want to add, or we would like to add in the future, would be referred to that issue about the progress bar, because when you have milestone, you can measure what you accomplished, and you can see it better from in the progress bar.
But yeah, no, honestly, I decided to use Angular because it was a bad choice, but I mean, it was good because I got to learn more about it because I really had no experience with Angular prior to this. But it definitely slowed down development on the front end, being able to implement a lot more of the features we wanted, just because I was basically learning everything for the first time as I was learning how to do it.
That's what stopped me from going to.
You guys, so you said that you didn't use Bootstrap? Because like I thought I saw the logo on the slide.
I forgot to delete that.
Oh, that's why I was so confused. I'm like, wait, did you use it? Like, you didn't.
Well, actually, I did it for a mockup and for doing a part that was about the onboarding section, which is it was exactly what you see getting into the application, what you can do with the application. And I use Bootstrap for doing that onboarding using a modal and putting inside carousels.
Yeah, our workflow is interesting because we basically did everything kind of separated. So I mean, normally, Angular itself is normally pretty isolated from the backend, which is why my app is just calling directly to his. But then, as far as the design too, he basically forked my repo and was working. And I mean, I made poor Adrian try to deal with learning Angular with me as well, which he did not sign up for. But he essentially did all the signing and stuff and sent it over to me. And then I broke everything last night trying to like combine everything. Yeah. So I had to redo. So that task modal for the details, I had to make that modal from scratch. the timer as well. There's no Angular date time picker, and I didn't want to use jQuery or anything, so that's all done from scratch as well.
You built a date time picker from scratch?
Well, so let me clear that. So the actual date picker here is an Angular material component.
Oh, okay. So when you click on the little calendar and the box pops up,
No.
Yeah, so you didn't make that.
No. So what I have to do is I basically have to take this date object and then this time input, which is just a string, and then I convert those into a date object that gets sent to the server because the server needs a date object, and then when I get it back, I also need to save the object and also change it into a string.
Yeah, that's fine. I thought you meant you built that whole thing.
No. Sorry.
Okay. I found the moment to be very helpful for that.
And yeah, I am using I don't have my laptop here. But I am using Material for Angular does have a moment module, which I am using. But it's still it's rough.
So say like I'm a manager and I say you spend so many hours on Angular and I say like, oh well, we could have just done that with jQuery. How would you make the case that this was like a while use of your time to get everything?
I would say, well, now you have someone that also knows a little bit of Angular.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Do you think, like in hindsight, do you think you could have gotten everything done quicker?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This was definitely more of just me wanting to punish myself, but also use it as a tool to help me
help you learn Angular. You're
Yeah,
going into a job where you know you're going to need it, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But so a lot of times when you have simple applications, people will think, oh yeah, we need Angular for this because Angular. But when you look at it, like that's a very bad decision, I think, that a lot of managers make because they could get things done a lot more quickly with just jQuery. You got skilled people who are just like good with jQuery. But there is a place for Angular, and we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But this is kind of borderline.
it would have taken like 20% of the time to do this with jQuery and Bootstrap. Like I got 40 minutes of sleep last night. It was fun.
What did you dream about?
Honestly, I don't even remember, man. Just modules and components and yeah, and it's cool too though because like this module and everything now, like I made that into a custom module so I can use this in future projects and just import that and have like a base module that I can use for other things.
I like that green box.
Like the off filter.
Should display here as well. So that's all dynamic.
And then what happens if you add a new task? Does it go to the bottom?
Yeah.
If you add like a fourth task? Okay. And then it's just going in rows of 3. Is it, so if you shrink this window though, will it work or no? It would be kind of better if they all went to the same line, but yeah, we're picky. And you guys had 2 weeks to do this. Like in the real world of professional development, like you would never be expected to get an app like this done in 2 weeks. It takes like months. So you guys all got like a whole lot done in this time. You all got a working product. I'm really impressed with all of you. But yeah, any questions on TaskGeek before we get to?
Where did you get the little guy? Did you draw them?
Oh yeah, was all you drawing them?
No, I use a library.
Cheater.
If I would draw everything, I would take like I would draw.
What library?
Little guy.
Adobe Stock.
Oh, you use Adobe Stock?
Yeah.
Really easy. Oh.
Yeah, I
I
have
don't use
everything.
that.
I transformed most of them just for my purpose, but actually it was somebody else.
Yeah.
But I can say I basically base the concept around those guys because that was what I intended to have as a final product. Something loose.
Where are the guys?
Online. Oh, it's the login page.
Oh,
You can log on.
Yeah, or go to the presentation.
Or just open a private window.
Yeah, I like the design a lot.
There's no log off.
Yeah, I like that design too. But what is that design based on? Because I feel like I see
I
something.
was going to, and then it was 7 a.m. and I was like, I need to go. Basically, that would be a simple process, just clearing local storage where we're taking the X off.
Oh, yeah, that is what it looks like.
Like what?
Like what?
So what is that? There's one pharmaceutical company whose logo that reminds me of. I can't. It's like GlaxoSmith. I forget what they're called. They're one of the big.
Yeah,
Castle Pharmaceuticals.
I know, did you come up with the
There was
logo?
an example app name when I was trying to learn Windows app.
What about the hair? Did you do the hair?
Did you
Was
do
that part of the?
Just like they made it to
That was part
they
of
called
the.
it ASCII. I was like, I just realized where.
Yeah, in some cases I
Yeah,
put
I don't think.
person out and then I stretch the hand.
Yeah. Oh,
And
okay.
then I do some other stuff.
Okay. Okay.
But
Yeah,
illustration page.
Yeah, no, of course.
Valid and face.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah, go to your presentation. There's like one of them reminds me of Trump, and I thought that was a joke.
Nowadays, it is very easy
No, not that
to
one.
assume
Not that
or
one.
everything
Not that
just
one.
based on.
Isn't that just the normal red?
He's like always.
Yeah, but he has some serious bad hair.
Like when the wind kicks up.
Yes.
Or when he gets a laugh.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah, oh, Jared.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. Yeah, great job, guys. I don't have any negative feedback from you. I'd have to see your database schema, and we're gonna look at your GitHubs too and review them, and you'll all get grades. But yeah, I thought it looked good. I thought it looked professional. I liked it that you got everything done in Angular, even though it was hard. I wasn't sure if you were going to. So that's good that you were able to follow through and actually get things done. That's all I have, John.
I'm just good job with the testing. That was pretty impressive. I like that you guys went through all the routes and did it with permission and without permission. That was great. But you know, again, just like you said, good job.
Yeah, and you're the only team that showed your test and everything.
Yeah.
Kudos to that. That's it.
See, I knew
Siobhan,
this would happen.
she wants to do an announcement before anyone leaves or does anything else.
Okay.
Your sneakers, your shoelaces are untied.
Yeah.
Yeah, be careful with
You're
that.
too important to us. Come on.
Yeah, Yeah, why can't, yes. So, guys, how are we feeling?
Hungry.
Not great. Great. Okay, well, we're gonna get out of here soon. I won't keep you guys for the extra hour. However, there are some things. Yeah, well, we gotta wait for Siobhan, and then people are probably just gonna wanna leave.
Well, we're gonna have to, because the thing is that we have a 50-minute lunch break. There goes our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so a few things I wanted to talk to you guys about, which will help you in your job searches. Tests. We learned last week about tests. However, it wasn't in the best format, and I'm not sure how much of it all of you really know. So I would like to go over this again with you guys quickly. Basically, what is the job interview answer for when you are asked tests? So if you've done anything with writing tests, were you guys know?
Yes.
Yeah, yes or not? Yeah, I like that answer.
I would say I made my own little test suite.
Okay.
It's kind of cool.
Anyone else?
Yes, there's a great
Didn't
site
retain it.
called Travis CI.
Yeah, that would be one interview question, but say you wanted to answer that question without even being asked it. And sometimes that's a good tactic in interviews, is you answer questions without even being asked it. So somebody asks you tests, what do you know about that? You could start out by making the distinction between functional testing and unit testing and integration testing, which is what we did with Express or Supertest. So you could maybe give an answer like, yeah, we learned about testing in my boot camp. We learned unit testing using Jasmine and Mocha, or using Mocha and Chai, rather. Mocha is the test runner, Chai is the assertion framework. And then you can maybe say that unit testing isn't that useful unless you have unit testable code. So that was another problem that you ran into. This will look impressive to them because it'll show that you've actually had to write tests and you understand unit testable code. You could maybe say something about pure functions. If you have a pure function, it's easy to write a unit test for, whereas if you have a function that has side effects that takes more than one input, then it's hard to write a unit for. It will be impressed that you know that. Then you can say that you also wrote integration tests for your Express app with Supertest. So if you give any one or all of those answers, you will be well on your way to correctly answering a question about tests and impressing them. Potential employer. Do you all of you guys get that? Do we want to go over that again? We did integration tests with super tests. We did functional tests with what? With Nightmare, right? And then we used Chai and Mocha to do unit testing in Express, but unit testing is not that useful if you don't have unit testable code. Thus far, we have not seen any code in the examples, so unit testing is not that useful. We're going to cover testing a little bit more, I think, when we get to React, because React uses testing. But that's it. Any questions on testing?
You answer that question by saying, I ran through every possible permutation on something I designed.
Well, permutation, the word permutation is more of like an algorithms word. Like you may get that as an algorithm question. How do you get all possible permutations of A, B, C, D? Meaning, how do I combine them? How do I get all the different possible orders of A, B, C, D? So that's like an algorithm question. In terms of software development, it's not really permutations. Isn't really what you're going to say. Scenarios is probably a better word for you. Okay, so
She's on her way.
get
She's on her way.
food and
She's on her way here.
Okay.
I guess if you guys want to eat time.
Yeah, if people are hungry and want
We
lots
have
of
mayo.
mayonnaise, we have lots of mayo and mustard.
And mustard. So you want to dip the chips in the mustard?
So get those calories, get those. Yeah.
I mean, if no one else is eating a sandwich, I'll literally eat off it. Maybe slather some mayo on it. Oh, I can have the lettuce as well.
I'm like a shopping manager.
Oh, you paid bread? Carbs.
Sam.
Oh, yeah. Overtime.
Oh, my goodness. How do you feel today?
Tired. Relieved.
Yeah? I'm super, did you record, did you record?
Yeah, we did, but we're
Okay.
using people's individual laptops, of course, so they've got the audio.
No audio?
No video.
No.
Well, because we're using their individual laptops, they need a development environment to run it on, which we don't have on the computer there, so recording it.
How do they do it? There it is.
Yeah, but the other classrooms, I remember some of these classrooms have a camera built in. Oh, that's a
We have a camera here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that points down.
Anyway, we have the audio this time, make sure nobody logged out.
Okay. Sorry that I missed it, but it's hard. Make sure to watch. This is the audio. Huh?
Yeah.
Or, the other classes are over there.
Oh.
But, real quick, I just want to go over a few announcements. Great job. I know you guys did amazing. Because other classes, they pretty good, had great things as well. So, I'm super proud of you guys because usually for project 2, everyone fights. All my classes, I promise you guys, no joke, that everyone fights during week 2. Not week 2 project, but project 2. I didn't hear any complaints, so if you guys are hiring a good job, if you guys did not stress me
We're
out.
still a fight club.
Huh?
We're still a fight club.
Yes. Melvin. Melvin has a son, right, Melvin?
No, Melvin has not.
I've
been gone crazy years ago.
Me too. So good job on that. I'm pretty sure the projects were great. You guys are talking. So just a good announcement. So June, I think it's June 23rd, we're gonna have another virtual tech talk. So get prepared for that. We're gonna have a few employers, hopefully more than 2. So that's gonna be through Zoom as well. And then on July 14th will be our official graduation day. So yes. That's gonna be a major accomplishment for you guys. You should be super excited. We're gonna have that here in the little fire classroom, the little outside area. Yeah, so we're gonna set that up. We'll set up tables, chairs, for your family. So invite your wives, husbands, kids, grandmas, whoever. We'll set up like seats for them and things like that, and then we'll set up what is your about that, about graduation.
Open bar?
Never know. I might have, you know, I would have surprise. Never know. I was gonna tell them MDR. I don't know about that. Might be alcohol.
So what time is it gonna be at?
It's gonna probably do the same for the past hour. It's no, I think it's around, 10 to 2. Yeah. I guess it's about that 10 to 2.
In the middle of July.
Yeah, let's do like from 6 to.
No. Not a Saturday.
No.
It's hot no matter what.
Oh, it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
Get a bouncy
That is like a
castle.
Tuesday, Thursday.
We're gonna have music.
DJ.
Never know.
I think Pedro wants to dance floor.
Heather, you're pushing it.
You sound, I got you a sound.
No, we can get one of those like Cuban little like backyard parties. Just leave it.
Spanish, Latino, we can make it work. Backyard parties. That's July 14th. July 12th will be final presentation day. So we'll have Thursday. We'll do presentations just like how we're doing it today. That's gonna be like a dry run for demo day, right? But demo day will be on July 14th, 19th. So it'll be after graduation.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so it'll give you more time to prepare, right, with your group. We're not gonna assign groups, just you guys have the opportunity to do it yourselves. You're gonna pick your group members, if you wanna do it solo, that's up to you as well.
All one group, guys.
Huh?
That would be interesting. Let me know how the conflicts go on.
Yeah, that would be drama.
Yeah, that would be.
So that'll be on July 19th. It's not gonna be in the Tesla building because we're too big of two glasses, too big. But it's going to be here. But it's gonna be at the big, if they have a big hall, it's gonna be really pretty. It'll be decorated. But it's gonna be really pretty. So that's where we're gonna have our employers, and hopefully we'll have more employers in our last graduating class. And this time we get to promote it. Instead of gonna promote it because it's a private building and things like that. So UM will also help us promote it. Right? But for demo day, we can't have any attend that, but we can have it for graduation. Questions about that? Get excited? Woo! Huh? This is your words.
I'll just give it a ride.
No, but like both Jonathans are like the OGs of this.
Thank you.
They're like little
I don't know, say something.
Wait, so when are you going? So when's your wedding?
My wedding is June 29th.
Okay.
So I'll be gone. I'll be on vacation. Not really. Family drama. Between.
Isn't there always
I'd rather
family
be at
drama?
work, huh?
Isn't there always family drama? That's real.
So I'll be in Texas for 2 days for a conference for work. So I'll be gone. I have to look at my girls. I tell them more. They came in like 17th to 19th. I'll be gone. About past 5. And then I'll be gone the week of my wedding, which will be the 23rd to the 29th, I think. I'll be gone for a week, and I'll be back. I'm not going on a honeymoon yet. I have to wait till you guys graduate, and then I go.
That's so
I have to wait till my kids graduate, and then I go on honeymoon. So I'll be here.
What's the name of it?
Oh, demo day is July 19th.
And your graduation is the Saturday before that?
Yeah, before the 14th.
What's that?
No, 16th. But I had to look at the
No,
calendar.
yes.
No.
14th you told me.
Oh, never mind.
I was like, do you girl?
July 12th.
Saturday is the 16th. I think your graduation day you told me was a Thursday.
We did Saturday night.
Sunday.
Oh, I think I remember you mentioning
Yeah.
that.
Oh, so July 12th
Everyone's gonna
will
be
be
like
the,
calling
okay.
to while they're driving back.
July 12th will be final presentation.
That's what you told me.
Yeah.
Are you gonna set up
And then
for
graduation will be July 14th.
Okay.
No, it's not doing that now.
And then the 19th will be.
Yeah, already,
Demo day.
yeah, everyone's
Tired.
there.
It's the same because we didn't have a test going on.
I already did my
Yeah, I didn't get what I wanted. So
So presentation will be,
I should've
they're
taken
gonna
notes.
rate at the TA,
I was also freaking out about this.
Yeah, there's lots of
You're
stuff.
going to come to the class. The
Speaking
demo
of
day
notes,
where you're gonna be
thank
presenting
you.
to the lawyer.
Right, so if someone already has a job, they don't have to be bothered.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
Another good question that Mappy just asked, right? So if you already have a job, you have to be at demo day.
What?
If you have a job and you don't really want to meet with employers, you have to be at demo day. No, but if you're working with a group, you should be there to support your group
Yeah,
and to do that sales pitch, right?
I agree.
So think about that. You should be there to support your students, support your classmates, just to show that we know.
Yeah.
Help them out. Yeah.
I'm saying I'd like to get
Well, you better hope your
conducive to getting a job. So you show up.
Thanks, Siobhan.
No class Saturday, no class on Tuesday.
Woo, thank you! Wait, this Saturday and this Tuesday?
Saturday
Memorial
and
weekend,
Tuesday.
Saturday, Tuesday, no class, no Saturday, Memorial weekend. But for those who are doing homework, take that time to do your homework.
So next Saturday and the Tuesday after that.
Yes.
Those are gonna do homework, that'll be fun.
Who's taking the sandwiches home?
You are. You know your body.
I mean, I'm going to a thing if no one
Wait, so this
Next Saturday
next Saturday.
and the Tuesday after that.
Alright, see you guys Tuesday.
I've gotten in a big habit of like when people like to say it very simple, like wait, this day and
Yeah, that's what I
make
always
sure
thought.
that's also like when people say is everyone ready or does everyone understand? I hate that. Does anyone not understand or is anyone not ready?
They teach us to do that.
Yeah. I learned that very, very quickly doing like tutoring and teaching.
No, I mean,